Okay, here we go with notes number 10 for algebra. It says represent functions as rules and tables. This is your first introduction to algebra. So make sure you write your name, date, and period. Our essential question is, how do you represent functions as tables and rules? And a way to do this is to set up the x and y and find the equation that makes it a function. And just so you know, function is a new word for you, is the rule that establishes the relationship between two quantities called the input and output, which is usually x and y. For each input is exactly one output. It's very, very essential that you know that there's exactly one output for each input, one for one. That's what makes it a function, which makes it a straight line or a line that does not repeat. It could be curved. That's a very important concept. So we have domain. And by the way, a rule is an equation or an equality that actually exists. The domain and range. The domain is all the input values that is given to you, and the range is all the output values. So it's what you put in and what you get out. It's usually the x, and this is usually the y. And then likewise, they also like to call them independent and dependent. The independent is the input values. Input variable, these are the input values which represent the domain. So they tie together. The input is the domain and the independent. The output is called the dependent variable because it depends on what you put into it. It is called the output variable, which is all the output values which represent the range. So the range is tied to the dependent variable. In the domain and range table here, just to put these together, domain refers to the input, the independent, the x, and then when it's writing in verbal references, it is the if, which is also the cause. On the range side, you have the output, you have the dependent, you have the y values. It is the then, which is also the effect of something taking place. Alright, on our first example, says we want to identify the domain and range of the function. The input and output table shows temperatures over various increments of time. So it's like at 0 hours, our temperature was 24, 2 hours is 27, 4 hours is 30 degrees, 6 hours is 33 degrees, and this is all Celsius. So the domain and range is what we got to indicate. And remember, up here, the domain is all your input values. If I look at my table, my input values are the hours. So my domain will be 0, 2, 4, and 6. The range is tied to all your output values. So here my output is the temperatures, which is 24, 27, 30, and 33. Okay. On the next example, let me put these in brackets. Make sure I write it correctly. Okay. Example 2 says, tell whether the pairing is a function and explain your reason. Well, if I have my inputs, we'll have this as a circle, and this one is a circle, looks like Mickey Mouse eyes, and inside them I'm going to put the numbers 4, 8, and 2, and then the other side 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to draw an arrow from 4 to 1, from 8 to 2, and 2 to 3. Okay. This official name is called a mapping. Okay, this is called a mapping. You're mapping the points from one input to the output. Now, is this a function? That's the question. Is this a function? Well, one way to know is to look at certain aspects. One thing is the x's do not repeat. Okay, if I look here in the x column, which is our inputs, I have a 4, 8, and a 2. Do they repeat? I know they do not because I have one arrow coming from each one of my lines. Okay, another way of looking at this is for every input, there is only one output. It's called a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, each one of these has exactly one output, one arrow going across. Since that is true, that means this is a function. Okay, this guy is a function. Alright, if I look at my second example that I'll fill in, oops, sorry, I have the word input at the top and output. Okay, I have a 2, 2 2s, a 3, and a 4. On the output side I have a 2, 4, 6, and an 8. Now if I'm looking at this, remember a function, my x's do not repeat, and that means that for every input there is exactly one output. So if I look here, notice I have 2 2s. If I put in a 2, I don't know whether I'm going to get a 2 or a 4 as an answer. So this is a no, not a function. And my reasoning is that 2 will give us 2 different answers. Okay, it gives us 2 different answers. So our x's are repeating, which is not allowed. Okay. There's 2 reasons. Alright, if I look at the next page, which should be on the back of yours, we have functions. A function may be represented using a rule that is related one to another. The verbal is the output is 2 less than the input. Well, the output, we said the output was going to be the letter Y. Is my equal sign. Less than, if we think back to the other day, less than means we got to flip our order. The input, we said the input was going to be the letter X. So that means I have X, and the word less than means to subtract. I have 2. If I fill in my table, I'm going to plug in the 2 for X and have 2 minus 2, which is 0. I plug the 4 in for X, and that means I'll have 4 minus 2, which is 2. If I plug a 6 in for the X, it would be 6 minus 2, which is 4. If I plug an 8 in, 8 minus 2 is 6, and then 10 minus 2 is 8, and I have completed my table. Okay. If I look at example 3, it says make a table for a function. This is the domain of the function y equals 3x is 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I use those values in my table. Make a table of the function, then identify the range of the function. So my function here is y equals 3x. So I'm looking at this column being 3, x, well, this would be a 0, 3, this is substituted 1, this one would be a 2, and this one I'd input a 3, because I'm looking at my equation being 3x. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. And that makes my range. Okay. It does say identify the range. I ran out of room, so I'm going to put it over here on the side. My range, and let me put it in ellipse, is 0, 3, 6, and 9, and I'll close it off. Notice I have the ellipse symbols. They're not parentheses. That symbolizes the range. Okay. On the function rule, this one we're going to need some room to write our steps, so I'm going to write them over here on the side because we're going to use our calculator to find our actual function rule. So my first step, let me put it down here, or I'll start it here. Step number 1, we're going to hit the stat button and edit. So if I get my calculator, turn it on and clear everything, the stat button is located right there. It's below the delete. It's on the row with the alpha button, so I'm going to push that button, and this is what pops up on my screen. Edit is number 1, so I'm going to hit a number 1 and I should get a clear screen. If not, raise your hands so that we can get that cleared out. The second step is we're going to put in your x's into L1. Okay, if you notice, here's L1 in the top left corner. If I look here, my inputs are going to be 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Those are all my x's. So what I'm going to do is type a 3 and then enter, type a 5 and enter, 7 and enter, 9 and enter, and then an 11 and enter. I'm going to right arrow to get to my second column. Third step is to put in your y values into L2. Okay, put your y values into L2. Okay, so I have my two tables in. My next step, which I'm going to put down here, number 4, is I'm going to go back into my stat button, and this time I'm going to go over to the calc, which is to the right at the top. Okay, so I'm going back and push the stat button again right here. And now if I look at my screen, I'm going to move to the right where it has calc. Use the right arrow and move it over. And then from there, my 5th step is I'm going to select, let me put it down here, L-I-N-G-R-E-G, which is actually number 4 on your list. If I look at my calculator, you see it says line reg. It stands for linear regression, and that's what we're going to find is our equation by hitting that 4. So hit a number 4 and this will pop up on your screen. Okay, so what I want to do, the last step, is I'm going to enter all the way to the word calculate. So if I'm looking at this screen, I'm going to enter, notice it moved down, and enter, and enter, and enter, and then I'm sitting on the word calculate. I'm going to enter one more time, and it gives me this. Well, here's my equation. That's the standard equation, and it tells me the A is going to equal 2 and the B is going to equal 0. And there's my equation. So that when I go here, I can say my equation is 2x plus 0, or that's just the same thing as y equals 2x. Okay. Here's the independent practice problems. I know you can work 1 and 2, but for number 3, do wait on that one to do in class so that you can find your rule for your function using these steps over here on the side. Make sure you have those copied down because this shows you how to get the equation of your line. I will allow you to do that in class.